Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I told my friend she couldn't bring her dog to my apartment because of allergies. I had always been careful about who I invited to my apartment. Living in the city wasn't cheap, and I'd worked hard to make my small one-bedroom place feel like a true safe haven. It wasn't fancy, just a second-floor walk-up with creaky hardwood floors and mismatched furniture I'd collected over the years. But it was mine, and I guarded it like a fortress. For one thing, I had severe allergies, and it shaped nearly every decision about my home. I avoided rugs because dust gathered too quickly. I vacuumed with a special HEPA filter 3 times a week. And most importantly, I had a strict no pets rule. It wasn't because I disliked animals. In fact, I loved them. I'd grown up with cats and dogs. But as I got older, my allergies worsened, to the point where being around fur for more than 30 minutes left me with watery eyes, a clogged nose, and tightness in my chest. By the end of an hour, I'd often need my inhaler just to breathe normally. My best friend Clara knew all of this, or at least she should have. We had been friends since college, nearly 7 years at that point. She was one of those people who could light up any room she walked into. Clara was extroverted where I was introverted, spontaneous where I was cautious. She had this laugh that drew people in and a talent for making even strangers feel like old friends. And she adored animals so much so that a year ago, she had adopted a rescue dog, a golden retriever mix named Baxter. I had met Baxter a couple of times in neutral settings, like parks or outdoor cafes. He was friendly, well-behaved, and undeniably adorable. But even after those short encounters, I'd feel the effects later. Sneezing fits, swollen eyes, the works. One Friday evening, Clara and I were making plans over the phone. I had been feeling a little down from a rough week at work, and she suggested we hang out. "Why don't I come over tomorrow?" she asked. "I'll bring snacks, we'll put on a movie just like old times." The idea sounded perfect low-key, comfortable, exactly what I needed. I hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. "Sure, come by around 7, I said. But then Clara added casually, "I'll bring Baxter too. He hates being alone for too long." My stomach dropped. I knew this was coming eventually. Clara had been integrating Baxter into every part of her life. She took him to brunch with friends, to weekend trips, even to work sometimes since her office was dog-friendly. But my apartment was one place he couldn't come. I took a breath and tried to sound calm. "Clara, you know I'm allergic. I can't have dogs in my apartment." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, come on," she said finally, her tone half joking, half pleading. "It'll just be for a couple of hours. I'll vacuum before I leave, and Baxter's really clean. He hardly sheds." I bit my lip. She had said similar things before, like how certain breeds were hypoallergenic, something my body never agreed with. I tried to explain again. "It's not about cleanliness. Even a little exposure messes me up. I really can't risk it, Clara." Her sigh came through the phone like static. "I just hate leaving him alone," she muttered. "It makes me feel guilty." I wanted to sympathize, I really did. But I also needed to protect myself. "I understand," I said gently, "but my health has to come first. Maybe you could come over without him this time. Or I can come to your place instead." Clara didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was clipped. "Fine. I'll come alone." The call ended shortly after, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something small but important had cracked between us. I wondered if she truly understood, or if she just thought I was being difficult. When Saturday evening arrived, I busied myself preparing my apartment for Clara's visit. I cleaned the counters, fluffed the couch pillows, and even lit a couple of soy candles to make the space feel cozier. It wasn't that I felt I had to impress her. We'd been friends long enough to see each other at our messiest. But I hoped a warm atmosphere might ease the tension left over from our phone call. Clara arrived right on time, balancing 2 bags of snacks and a bottle of wine. She wore her usual bright smile, though something about it felt forced. "Hey," she said, hugging me as she stepped inside. For a moment, everything felt normal, and I let myself believe the conversation about Baxter was behind us. We settled on the couch, opened a bag of chips, and put on an old comedy we'd loved in college. At first, it was comfortable, the kind of easy evening I'd wanted. We laughed at the same jokes, reminisced about old times, and talked about her new project at work. But after half an hour, Clara's comments started circling back to Baxter. You know, she said as she refilled her wine glass, he gets anxious when I'm away too long. I left him with one of my neighbors tonight, but I hate doing that. He's probably pacing by the door right now, waiting for me. I gave a sympathetic nod, though inside I felt a knot tighten. I could tell she wanted me to offer a solution, to change my mind and say Baxter could come next time. Instead, I said, I'm sure he'll be okay for a few hours. Dogs are resilient. She sighed dramatically. Maybe, but he's family to me. I just wish you weren't allergic. It makes everything so complicated. Her words stung more than I expected. I hadn't chosen to have allergies. They weren't some quirky preference I could turn off. I wanted to defend myself, to remind her that I'd never once asked her to give up time with Baxter, that I always met her at dog-friendly cafes or parks when she wanted to bring him along. But I held my tongue. The last thing I wanted was a fight. As the movie played on, I noticed Clara getting restless. She checked her phone several times, clearly distracted. When the credits rolled, she jumped up almost immediately. I should head back. Don't want Baxter to feel abandoned. Of course, I said, trying to mask my disappointment. I had hoped for a longer evening together, maybe even some heart-to-heart catching up. Instead, I walked her to the door and watched her hurry down the stairs, her phone already at her ear, probably calling her neighbor to check on the dog. When I closed the door, the silence of my apartment felt heavier than usual. I sat back on the couch staring at the empty snack bags. Clara had been physically present but mentally somewhere else the entire evening. I couldn't help but wonder, was our friendship becoming a three-way relationship, me, Clara, and her dog? And if so, where did that leave me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much Baxter had changed things. Clara's social life revolved around him now. Most group outings included him, and when they didn't, she seemed uneasy, distracted, or in a rush to get back to him. I admired her devotion, but I also felt excluded from parts of her life. That night, as I lay in bed, my chest felt tight not from allergies, but from worry. Clara was my best friend. She'd been there through breakups, job changes, late-night crying sessions, and countless small joys. But now it felt like Baxter was slowly replacing me. And the worst part? I didn't know how to tell her without sounding jealous or unreasonable. The following week, I decided to take the initiative and invite Clara out. I thought maybe if I suggested something outside my apartment where Baxter could join us, it might balance things out. How about brunch on Sunday? I texted her. That new cafe with the outdoor seating? Her reply was almost instant. Perfect. I'll bring Baxter. He'll love it there. Part of me winced at the predictability of her response, but I brushed it off. On Sunday morning, I arrived at the cafe a little early and grabbed a table in the shade. A few minutes later, Clara appeared radiant as always, with Baxter trotting beside her on his leash. The dog immediately sprawled under the table, tail wagging. We ordered food, chatted about work, and caught up on some mutual friends. Clara looked more relaxed than she had at my apartment, laughing easily as she fed Baxter bits of scrambled eggs under the table. I told myself I could live with this arrangement meeting her in spaces where Baxter could come, while keeping my apartment a safe zone for myself. But then Clara brought it up again. You know, she said between sips of her mimosa, Baxter would have loved hanging out at your place the other night. He's super calm indoors. Honestly, I think you'd barely notice him. I set my fork down, my patience thinning. Clara, we've talked about this. I would notice him. My body reacts even if I don't touch him. It's not about how calm or clean he is. She frowned, looking at me as if I were being unreasonable. But it's such a shame. You're my best friend and he's my baby. I just want both of you in the same space, you know? I hate having to choose. Her words lodged in my chest like a thorn. I hated it too, but I didn't see a way around it. I'm not asking you to choose, I said softly. I'm just asking you to respect that my apartment can't have dogs. I always meet you and Baxter outside. That's my compromise. Clara sighed, leaning back in her chair. I guess. It just feels like a barrier. Like, what if we want to do a girls' night in or something? I can't leave him alone for that long. Her tone wasn't angry exactly, but it carried a quiet frustration, a disappointment that felt heavier than any outright argument. I nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. Every compromise seemed to circle back to the same invisible wall. Baxter couldn't cross my doorway, and Clara couldn't imagine her life without him in every corner. When brunch ended, she hugged me tightly and said, "You know I love you, right? I just want us all to fit together somehow." I forced a smile and said, "I know." But as I walked home, her words echoed in my mind. Us all. She didn't mean just the two of us anymore. She meant her, me, and Baxter as a unit. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't fit neatly into that triangle. That night, I drafted and deleted several texts to her, messages explaining how left out I felt, messages begging her to understand that allergies weren't a choice, messages reminding her that I'd never asked her to sideline Baxter, only to respect one single boundary. In the end, I sent none of them. Instead, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if our friendship was slowly unraveling over something I couldn't control. 2 weeks later, Clara called me on a Thursday evening. Her voice was light, casual, as if nothing heavy had been simmering between us. "Hey, I was thinking I could swing by Saturday. I'll bring some wine and we can finally have that girls' night we always talk about." I hesitated. The idea sounded nice, just us, no distractions. But a part of me braced for the inevitable. "That sounds good," I said cautiously, "as long as you're okay, leaving Baxter at home." "Of course," she said quickly, too quickly. "Don't worry." I wanted to believe her. I told myself she understood by now, that she'd respect my boundary this time. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly the next day, bought snacks, and even picked out a couple of movies I knew she'd love. On Saturday, I heard her footsteps coming up the stairwell before she knocked. I opened the door, smiling only to feel my stomach drop. There was Clara holding a leash, and at the other end of it, tail wagging happily, was Baxter. For a moment, I froze. I actually thought maybe I was imagining it. But Baxter was there in the flesh, sniffing at my doorway like he belonged. Clara beamed as if nothing were amiss. "Surprise! I thought I'd try bringing him just this once. I promise he'll be good." My throat tightened, anger bubbling under the shock. "Clara," I said slowly, "we agreed. No dogs in my apartment." She waved her free hand dismissively. I know, but I figured it can't hurt to try. You'll see he's perfectly fine inside. He won't even go on the furniture." I could already feel the phantom itch in my throat, the memory of past reactions sparking panic in my chest. "It does hurt to try," I snapped. "You know what happens to me. I can't risk it. Not even once." Her smile faltered, but she tugged gently on the leash, coaxing Baxter closer. "Please, just give him a chance. I hate leaving him alone. I thought if you actually saw how calm he is, you might change your mind." I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, he cannot come in. Clara, I'm serious." For a beat, we stood there, me blocking the doorway, her clutching the leash. Baxter sat patiently between us, oblivious to the tension. Finally, Clara exhaled sharply, frustration flashing in her eyes. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered. "I thought you trusted me enough to try." That cut deep. I wanted to scream that this wasn't about trust. It was about my health. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm. "I do trust you, Clara, but I can't change my body's reaction to dogs. If you can't respect that, then I don't know what else to say." Her jaw tightened. She looked down at Baxter, then back at me. "Fine," she said coldly. "We'll just go." And with that, she turned and walked down the stairs, Baxter trotting faithfully beside her. I closed the door slowly, my hands trembling. The silence of the apartment pressed in on me, heavier than ever. I leaned against the door, fighting the sting of tears. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was about respect, about friendship, about whether Clara saw me as someone worth compromising for, or just an obstacle standing between her and the life she wanted with Baxter. The days after Clara's attempted visit felt strange. Normally, we texted everyday silly memes, updates about work, plans for the weekend. But now, there was nothing. My phone stayed silent, except for the occasional work notification or spam call. Each time it buzzed, my heart leapt, hoping it was Clara, only to sink again when it wasn't. I told myself to wait her out, to give her space. She'd cool off, realize she had crossed a line, and apologize. At least that's what I wanted to believe. But as the silence stretched on, doubt crept in. What if she thought I was the one who needed to apologize? What if, in her mind, I was being unreasonable, putting my allergies above her feelings for Baxter? A week passed before we finally spoke again. It wasn't through text, but in person by sheer coincidence. I was walking home from the grocery store, bags in hand, when I spotted Claire across the street with Baxter. She saw me too, and for a moment we both froze. She crossed over, Baxter happily trotting beside her, tail wagging. "Hey," she said carefully, as if testing the waters. "Hey," I echoed, adjusting the bags in my hands. My chest felt tight, though this time it wasn't from allergies. It was from the awkwardness between us. We stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, people passing around us. Finally, Clara sighed. "Look, about the other night, I just thought maybe you'd see he's not a problem. I didn't mean to upset you." The words were close to an apology, but not quite. "You did upset me," I said quietly. "Clara, it's not about whether Baxter behaves. It's about my health. I can't risk having him in my apartment. That's never going to change." Her expression softened a little, but there was still resistance in her eyes. "I get it, I do. But it feels like you're asking me to separate two parts of my life that are inseparable. He's everything to me." I swallowed hard. "I'm not asking you to separate anything. I'm just asking you to respect one boundary. Everywhere else, I make it work. Parks, cafes, your place. I go wherever you want, even if it triggers me a little. But my apartment has to stay safe. That's all I'm asking." For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." It wasn't the reassurance I wanted, but it was something. We parted ways shortly after, and I walked home with my groceries, replaying the conversation in my head. I wanted to believe her, to believe that things would go back to normal. But something told me this wasn't over. The way she'd said "I'll try" instead of "I understand" gnawed at me. Trying wasn't the same as respecting. Trying wasn't the same as accepting my reality. That night, I sat on my couch and stared at the empty space beside me, the space where Claire used to sit during our late-night talks and movie marathons. I realized with a pang that our friendship had begun to shift into something conditional, something fragile. And the worst part was, I didn't know if it could survive the weight of one golden retriever's leash. For a little while, things seemed to stabilize. Claire and I went back to our usual hangouts, coffee shops, outdoor patios, occasional trips to her apartment where Baxter would curl up at her feet while we chatted. I always left with a scratchy throat and watery eyes, but I told myself it was worth it to keep the friendship alive. Still, the balance felt off. I noticed how often Clara's attention drifted to Baxter during our conversations, how every story circled back to something he had done, how he learned a new trick, how the neighbor's kid loved him, how strangers complimented him on walks. I smiled and nodded, but deep down, I felt like I was competing with a dog for her affection. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw that Claire had posted pictures from a small dinner party at her place. A few mutual friends were there, laughing around the table, glasses raised in a toast. Baxter was in the middle of the photos, tongue out, clearly adored by everyone. My chest tightened. Claire hadn't even mentioned it to me. I told myself maybe it was last minute. Maybe she didn't want to make me uncomfortable since Baxter would obviously be there. But the more I stared at the pictures, the more it felt like I'd been quietly excluded. Like she'd chosen not to invite me rather than navigate the complication of my allergies. The next time we met, I brought it up casually. "I saw the photos from your dinner party. Looked fun." Clara blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Oh yeah, it was just something spontaneous. I didn't think you'd want to come since, Baxter was there." Her words stung more than I expected. "Clara, I don't mind being around him at your place. You know that. I would have come." She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I just didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. Plus, everyone else already knows Baxter and loves having him around." It just felt easier. Easier. That word cut deeper than she realized. Easier to leave me out than to risk me being a little sniffly. Easier to choose the dog over the friend. I forced a smile, but the rest of the evening felt hollow. Later, as I walked home alone, anger simmered under my skin. This wasn't about allergies anymore. It was about priorities. Clara had made it clear where I ranked, and it wasn't first. Maybe not even second. That night, I lay awake replaying our entire friendship, in my mind college dorm nights, graduation, heartbreaks we'd talked each other through. I remembered how many times I had shown up for her, no matter what. And now, when all I asked for was one boundary, it felt like too much for her. I started to wonder if our friendship was built on shaky ground all along. Or maybe it was strong once, but the cracks had spread too far to ignore. The breaking point came on a rainy Saturday evening. Clara had invited me to her place for dinner, just the two of us, a chance to catch up. I almost didn't go, but guilt pulled me there. I told myself maybe this was her way of making amends. When I arrived, she greeted me warmly, hugging me at the door. Baxter bounded up, tail wagging, and I crouched to scratch his head briefly, knowing I'd pay for it later with itchy eyes. Dinner smelled delicious pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread, wine poured generously into mismatched glasses. For the first hour, it felt almost normal, like old times. But then, as we moved to the couch, Clara dropped it again. "You know," she said casually, "I still think you're overreacting about Baxter and your place. If you just gave it a chance, I bet you'd see it's not that bad." I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. My chest tightened, not from allergies this time, but from frustration. "Clara, we've had this conversation so many times. It is that bad. You've seen what happens even after short visits. Why do you keep pushing this?" She leaned forward, her voice soft but insistent. "Because it feels unfair. You're my best friend and Baxter's my family. It hurts that the two of you can't just coexist. I want us all together." I set my glass down, hands trembling slightly. "Clara, this isn't about fairness. It's about health. I can't change the fact that my body reacts to dogs. Do you think I like this? Do you think I wouldn't love to have him over if I could?" Her face tightened. "Sometimes it feels like you're choosing your comfort over our friendship." That hit me like a slap. My comfort? As if breathing freely were some luxury I was selfishly hoarding. My voice cracked as I replied, "Clara, I'm not choosing comfort. I'm choosing survival. Do you even realize how scary it is to struggle to breathe because of allergies? It's not optional. It's not negotiable." The room fell silent. Only the sound of Baxter's paws clicking across the floor as he settled at her feet. Clara looked down, her expression torn. Finally, she muttered, "I just wish it didn't have to be this way." "So do I said softly. "But wishing won't change it. Respecting my boundary will." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the way I wanted things to go. I wanted her to understand, to meet me halfway. Instead, it felt like we were standing on opposite sides of a canyon, shouting at each other across the gap. When I left that night, the rain still pouring, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The friendship we once had, effortless, unconditional, was slipping away. And I wasn't sure either of us knew how to pull it back. After that confrontation, Clara and I drifted further apart. Our texts became sporadic, shorter, more surface level. Instead of a daily chatter, we exchanged the occasional meme or "how's work" message, but the warmth had thinned. It felt like we were both avoiding the deeper conversation neither of us wanted to have again. I threw myself into my own routines, work, solo movie nights, weekend errands. But there was an emptiness I couldn't ignore. Clara had been my anchor for so long, the person I could always turn to. Now, the silence between us felt like a phantom limb, something missing that should have been there. Meanwhile, social media showed me a version of Clara's life I wasn't part of. Photos of group hikes with Baxter bounding ahead. Selfies with mutual friends. Everyone gathered in her apartment, with the dog sprawled happily in the center. Even little things, like her captions. Family first, or couldn't do life without him. Each post felt like a subtle reminder that I wasn't included in her definition of family anymore. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that friendships change, that maybe we were just outgrowing each other. But when I saw Clara one afternoon at the grocery store, the sight of her laughing into her phone while Baxter sat patiently in the cart's lower shelf made my chest ache. She didn't see me, and I slipped away before she could. One evening, after another lonely weekend, I finally broke. I called her. She answered after a few rings, sounding surprised. "Hey, stranger," she said lightly. "Hey," I replied, my voice quieter. "Clara, can we talk?" There was a pause, then a careful, "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath. "I miss you. I miss how things used to be. But I feel like Baxter has replaced me in a way. And I don't know how to fit into your life anymore without sacrificing my health." The line was quiet for a long time. Finally, Clara sighed. "I don't want to lose you, but I also can't imagine my life without him. He's everything to me. You're asking me to split myself in two." My throat tightened. "I'm not asking you to split anything. I just need one space. My apartment that stays safe for me. Everywhere else I've tried to adapt. Isn't that enough?" Her voice softened, but it was filled with weariness. "Sometimes it feels like it's not. I want us to have the kind of friendship where nothing is off limits, and Baxter being off limits. It feels wrong." I didn't know what to say. It was as if she needed me to bend reality to match her vision of friendship, and I couldn't. We ended the call on polite notes, but when I set my phone down, I knew the distance between us had widened. Not with anger, but with inevitability. Another month passed, and by then Clara and I were barely speaking. I'd catch glimpses of her life online, always full of people, laughter, and of course, Baxter. Meanwhile, my own days felt smaller, quieter, lonelier. I wanted to reach out, but every time I tried, the memory of our arguments stopped me. Then, one evening, I got a text from a mutual friend, Mia. "Hey, are you coming to Clara's game night tomorrow?" I froze. "Game night?" I typed back. "Yeah, she's hosting. Should be fun." She said everyone's invited. Everyone, apparently, except me. The realization hit like ice water. Claire hadn't even bothered to tell me about it. My throat tightened as I wrote back a casual excuse, claiming I was busy. But inside, something cracked. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was about feeling excluded, unimportant, discarded. The next day, against my better judgment, I opened social media. There they were, pictures from the game night. Claire in the center, laughing, Baxter sprawled happily across someone's lap as cards were dealt on the table. Everyone looked so comfortable, so at home in her world. Everyone but me. I sat in the dark of my apartment, phone glowing in my hand, heart pounding. For the first time, anger outweighed sadness. I opened our chat and typed, "Why didn't you invite me?" Her reply came quickly. "I didn't think you'd want to come since Baxter was here." I stared at the message, fury building. My thumbs flew over the screen. "You never even gave me the choice, Clara. You just assumed. I've put myself through itchy eyes and sore throats just to spend time with you. But now you're cutting me out completely?" There was a long pause before her dots appeared. "I'm sorry, I just thought it would be easier. I don't want you to feel like the odd one out. Everyone loves Baxter. It's hard to imagine a night without him there." That was it. The confirmation of what I'd feared all along. I typed back, "So basically, I don't fit in your life anymore, unless I accept being sick every time I see you." Her final message came after a long delay. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how to make this work either." I didn't reply. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was caving in, but beneath the pain was clarity. The friendship we had, the easy, unconditional closeness, was gone. And Baxter wasn't the real cause. The cause was Clara's refusal to see my needs as valid, her choice to prioritize convenience over compromise. That night, I deleted the chat thread. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Because holding on was hurting more than letting go. In the weeks that followed, I expected Clara to reach out. Part of me held on to that fragile hope that she'd show up at my door, that she'd finally understand, that she'd choose our friendship over her stubborn need to blur boundaries. But the silence stayed, and in that silence, something inside me shifted me. At first, it hurt every day. I'd pass the cafe where we used to spend hours, or see a golden retriever at the park, and the ache would return sharp and fresh. But slowly, the pain dulled into something else. Acceptance. I began to realize that friendships, no matter how strong, aren't immune to erosion. Sometimes it's a fight, sometimes it's distance, and sometimes it's simply a refusal to compromise. I started filling my time differently. I joined a local book club. I signed up for a cooking class on Wednesday nights. I even reconnected with an old coworker, someone I'd lost touch with years ago. My apartment became a place of comfort again, no longer a battleground for unspoken resentment. Clara didn't disappear completely from my world. Her life still floated across my social media feed. Pictures of Baxter in costumes, hikes with friends, birthday celebrations. I no longer lingered on them. I'd scroll past with only a faint pang, a shadow of the grief I'd once felt. One evening, months later, I bumped into her by chance at a bookstore. She looked the same, bright-eyed, warm smile, but there was a distance in her expression, a polite shield between us. We exchanged small talk, caught up on surface details. She mentioned Baxter, of course, and I nodded with a smile that felt genuine enough. But the conversation ended quickly, and when she walked away, I didn't feel hollow. I felt free. Because by then I understood. Letting her go wasn't a failure. It was an act of self-respect. I couldn't force her to value my health, my boundaries, my needs, and she couldn't force me to mold myself around her choices. Claire had chosen her path with Baxter at the center of it, and I had chosen mine with a clear boundary that protected me, even if it cost me a friendship I once cherished. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the ending I needed. And in that quiet acceptance, I finally breathed easy, not because there was no dog hair in the air, but because for the first time in months, I was no longer suffocating under the weight of someone else's disregard.